I was sitting in my kitchen on a Tuesday morning, drinking my coffee, when my neighbor Dorothy knocked on my back door. She looked uncomfortable, holding her phone like it might burn her hand. She showed me the screen without saying a word. There I was, struggling through a yoga pose in my living room, my face red with effort. My son Brandon's voice narrated over the video. "That face suits you, old lady. My ridiculous mother thinks she's 25. Somebody please tell her to act her age." 73,000 views. The comments were worse. Dorothy left after a few awkward minutes of trying to comfort me. I sat alone at my kitchen table. That image burned into my mind. My own son had secretly filmed me in my own home, posted it online for strangers to mock me, and 73,000 people had watched it. 73,000 people had seen me at my most vulnerable and laughed. I thought about Brandon, my only child, my baby boy. His father Gerald died 8 years ago from a massive heart attack. He was only 62 years old, gone in an instant. Brandon had been 24 then, struggling to find his footing in the world. He moved back home temporarily to grieve with me, to help me adjust to being alone. That was 8 years ago. He never left. For 8 years, I supported him entirely. He claimed he was building a social media career, working on his personal brand. He paid no rent. I bought all his groceries. I gave him his father's truck, a beautiful Chevy Gerald had babied for years. I did this because he was my son, and I loved him. When you're a mother, you make sacrifices. You give everything you have because that's what love looks like. Or so I thought. But this video crossed every line I had. This wasn't just being inconsiderate or taking advantage. This was cruelty. This was humiliation. This was my son telling the entire world that I was ridiculous, that my age made me a joke, that my very face was something to mock. I made a decision right there at my kitchen table. I wouldn't confront him about the video. Confrontation would just lead to excuses, manipulation, tears, promises to do better. I'd heard it all before. Instead, I would simply stop enabling him financially. It was time for Brandon to grow up. It was past time. I drove to First National Bank, where I'd been banking for 40 years. The building was familiar, comforting. I knew most of the tellers by name. I asked to speak with someone about my accounts. Amy, a young woman who usually helped me, pulled up my information. I explained that I wanted to close the joint checking account I shared with Brandon. I'd opened it 3 years ago when he said he needed access to funds for emergencies. I wanted to transfer whatever was left to my personal account. Amy's fingers flew across her keyboard. Then her face changed. The professional smile faded. She looked confused, then concerned. She excused herself and returned with the bank manager, Thomas Weber. I'd known Thomas for years. He'd helped Gerald and me set up our retirement accounts back in the day. Thomas asked me to come to his private office. The moment he closed the door, I knew something was terribly wrong. He pulled up my account statements on his computer screen and turned the monitor so I could see. Over the past 18 months, Brandon had been systematically draining the joint account. That part didn't surprise me. I'd given him access for that purpose, even if I hadn't expected him to use quite so much. But Thomas kept scrolling. My main checking account, the one with only my name on it, the one where my pension and Social Security deposited each month, Brandon had somehow gained access to that too. Thomas showed me transaction after transaction, forged signatures, online transfers Brandon had set up using my computer when I wasn't looking. Small amounts at first, $200 here, $300 there, then larger chunks. Last month alone, $6,000. He'd stolen nearly $38,000 from me over the past year and a half. But Thomas wasn't finished. He pulled up credit card statements. A credit card I'd never applied for, never even knew existed. It was in my name, $23,000 in charges. A new laptop, expensive dinners, payments to someone named Courtney Brennan. The numbers swirled in front of me. My hands started shaking. Thomas kept talking, his voice gentle but firm. Total amount stolen, over $60,000. My life savings, Gerald's legacy, our future security, gone, stolen by my own son. Thomas explained that I needed to file a fraud report with the bank. He helped me close every account and open new ones. He changed all my passwords, set up new security questions. He was kind, professional. But then he said the words I'd been dreading. If I wanted the money back, I needed to report this to the police. It was identity theft. It was forgery. It was fraud. And the person who committed these crimes was my son. I drove home in a daze. My mind kept circling back to the same question. How could he do this? How could my own child, the baby I'd nursed and raised and loved with everything I had, how could he systematically rob me? I thought about confronting him immediately. I even rehearsed what I'd say. But I decided to wait until morning. I needed time to process this, to figure out how to handle it. Brandon came home that evening around 9 o'clock, carrying bags from an expensive steakhouse downtown. He was cheerful, smiling. He asked if I wanted some of his leftovers. Prime rib, he said. Cost $47 for one meal. $47. My money. Money he'd stolen from me. I told him no thank you. He shrugged and went to his room. The room that used to be Gerald's office. The room I'd given up so Brandon would have more space. I lay awake all night in my bed, staring at the ceiling, processing betrayal upon betrayal. The TikTok video, the stolen money, the secret credit card, the lies, all of it from my son. All of it while I'd given him everything. The next morning, I got up early. I'd made my decision. I would confront Brandon directly. I'd rehearsed my speech 100 times during my sleepless night. I would be firm but loving. I would tell him I knew about the theft. I would insist he get help, get a job, pay me back. I would give him 30 days to find a new place to live. I made coffee and waited. Brandon finally came downstairs around 11 o'clock, wearing the expensive athletic clothes I'd bought him for Christmas. He yawned and headed for the refrigerator. I put the bank statements on the kitchen table, all of them. Printed out, highlighted, undeniable. Brandon, we need to talk. He looked at the papers, then at me. For just a second, I saw something flicker across his face. Calculation. Then it was gone, replaced by confusion. I walked him through it. The joint account draining, that was one thing. But the main checking account, the forged signatures, the credit card I never authorized. $60,000, Brandon? You stole $60,000 from me. I expected shame, guilt, remorse, an apology, something human. Instead, Brandon's face turned red. He slammed his hand on the table. His voice rose to a shout. You owe me this money. Dad's life insurance should have gone to me. You lived off Dad for years, now it's my turn. You're being selfish and controlling. I stood there, stunned. He was turning this around on me. He claimed I'd promised him that money. He said I was playing the victim. He called the TikTok video just a joke, said I was too sensitive, couldn't take a little teasing. I found my voice. Brandon, you're 32 years old. You haven't paid rent in 8 years. You've stolen from me. This ends now. You have 30 days to find a new place to live. I'm closing your access to everything. His eyes went cold. You'll regret this. You have no idea what you're doing. He grabbed Gerald's truck keys off the counter and stormed out. The door slammed so hard the windows rattled. 2 hours passed. I tried to calm down, tried to process what had just happened. Then my phone started ringing. My sister Eleanor called first. Margot, what is happening? Brandon just called me crying. He says you attacked him and threw him out with no warning. He says you're having some kind of breakdown. Then my daughter Sarah called from Denver. Mom, Brandon says you're accusing him of stealing and you've become paranoid. He says you might have early dementia. Are you okay? Brandon had called every family member with his version of events. In his story, I was the villain. I was irrational, possibly suffering cognitive decline. I'd always been controlling, but now it was getting dangerous. He'd been taking care of me, but I'd turned on him. He was worried about my mental state. I tried to explain. I sent Eleanor and Sarah the bank statements via email, but Brandon had an answer for everything. I gave him permission to use that money, he told them. She's confused about what she authorized. The credit card was for me. She applied for it. Now she's forgotten. Eleanor, my own sister, said the words I'd been dreading. Margot, honey, you need to see a doctor. Memory problems are nothing to be ashamed of. Brandon's been so good to stay with you all these years. Sarah was more cautious, but I could hear the worry in her voice. Mom, maybe you should get checked out? Just to be sure? Brandon says you've been forgetting conversations. I'd never felt so alone in my life. My son had turned my own family against me with lies. Then I saw his new TikTok video. He was sitting in his truck, Gerald's truck, crying. The caption read, "When your mom who raised you suddenly accuses you of stealing and kicks you out with no warning, I'm worried about her mental health. But she won't get help. Pray for us." 140,000 views. The comments were sympathetic. Elder abuse goes both ways. She sounds unstable. Get her checked for dementia. That afternoon, I drove to the police station. I had to report this. I had to make it official. Detective Linda Shaw took my statement. She was in her 40s, professional, thorough. She reviewed all my evidence, the bank statements, the forged signatures, the unauthorized credit card. It looked solid, she said. But then her expression changed. Miss Margot, I need to tell you something. We received a call about you this morning, from your son. He filed a report claiming you're experiencing mental health issues and might be a danger to yourself. He said you're making false accusations against him. We have to take that seriously. I felt the trap closing around me. If I pursued charges, I looked like the unstable one. If I didn't pursue charges, Brandon got away with everything. I insisted the charges stand. Detective Shaw said she'd investigate, but it would take time. Weeks, maybe months. I drove home to my empty house. Brandon was gone. My family doubted me. The police were investigating me, as much as they were investigating him. And somewhere out there, my son was planning his next move. 2 days later, on Friday morning, an envelope arrived in my mail. Law Offices of Richard Hastings, attorney at law. I opened it with shaking hands. It was a demand letter. Brandon was suing me. Through his lawyer, he demanded that I reimburse him for years of unpaid caregiving services. He claimed I owed him Gerald's life insurance money, that there was a verbal agreement. He demanded I cease making defamatory statements about him. And he demanded I undergo a mental health evaluation. If I didn't comply, he would sue me for defamation, elder abuse against him, and breach of oral contract. I thought about the letter Linda sent, claiming none of this was her fault. But I'd learned something through all this. You don't get to abandon someone and then claim credit when they succeed. You don't get to tear someone down and then demand to share their triumph. I called Frank Morrison, the lawyer who'd handled Gerald's estate. Frank was 58, calm, experienced. He'd known Gerald and me for 20 years. I trusted him. Frank came to my house that afternoon. He reviewed everything. The demand letter, the bank statements, the TikTok videos, all of it. His face grew grimmer with each document. Margot, this is serious. Brandon's not just trying to get money. He's building a case that you're incompetent. If he can prove that, he could potentially seek conservatorship, control over your finances, your decisions, your life. The word hit me like a physical blow. Conservatorship. Like Britney Spears, I thought absurdly. Like those news stories about elderly people trapped by greedy relatives. That couldn't happen to me. I was sharp, healthy, independent. But Frank explained how it worked. Brandon just needed to convince a judge that I couldn't manage my own affairs. The accusations of memory loss, the police report about my mental state, the fake claims about confusion. He was building a paper trail. We need to gather evidence, Frank said. Character witnesses, medical evaluations to prove you're competent, documentation of everything. Over the next week, I collected evidence like my life depended on it, because it did. Bank statements showing the theft. The forged signatures, which looked nothing like Gerald's actual signature or mine. The credit card application I never filled out. screenshots of the TikTok videos before Brandon could delete them. I got statements from people who knew me. My doctor, who confirmed I was in excellent health with no signs of cognitive decline. My former school principal, who wrote that I'd retired in excellent standing after 32 years of teaching. Dorothy, who documented my daily competence and independence. But then Brandon filed a police report against me. He claimed I'd physically assaulted him during our confrontation. That was a complete lie. I'd never touched him. He claimed I'd made threats against his girlfriend Courtney, a woman I'd never even met. He said I was stalking him online. He painted a picture of a paranoid, violent woman spiraling out of control. And he had a witness. Courtney Brennan, his girlfriend. She was 27 years old, worked at a hair salon, had bleached hair and sharp eyes in the photo I found online. Courtney gave a statement to police that I'd always been controlling and abusive toward Brandon, that I'd called her and threatened her, that I'd once thrown a dish at Brandon. Every word was a lie. Then Adult Protective Services got involved. A social worker named Patricia Gomez came to my house. She was kind but thorough, asking questions about my daily life, my finances, my relationship with Brandon. I showed her everything. The evidence of theft, the TikTok videos, the lies. Patricia seemed sympathetic, but said she had to investigate all reports. What I didn't know yet was that Brandon had also contacted my doctor's office, claiming to be a concerned son, worried about his mother's memory. He'd tried to access my medical records. He failed, but it added to his paper trail of worried son. A court date was set, 3 weeks away. There would be a competency hearing. If Brandon's lawyer could convince a judge I wasn't mentally competent, Brandon could be granted temporary conservatorship while I underwent further evaluation. I was facing the potential loss of my autonomy, my freedom, my entire life, and my son was the one trying to take it all away. The 3 weeks before the hearing were the longest of my life. Frank worked constantly, building my defense, but I barely slept. Every night I lay awake, wondering how my life had come to this. During the first week, I underwent a full neuropsychological evaluation, hours of tests, memory, processing speed, problem solving, verbal skills. The neuropsychologist, Dr. Helen Park, was thorough and professional. When she gave me the results, I almost cried with relief. "You're sharp as a tack, Miss Margot. No cognitive decline whatsoever. In fact, your memory and processing speed are above average for your age. You scored in the 92nd percentile in several categories." I had proof, scientific, medical proof, that I was competent. But Brandon kept posting on TikTok. One video showed him packing boxes in a storage unit, looking sad and defeated. The caption: "When your parent refuses to get help, sometimes you have to step back for your own mental health." Thousands of comments supported him. "You're doing the right thing. She's lucky to have such a caring son." Eleanor came to visit during the second week, trying to stage an intervention. She brought pamphlets about memory care facilities and aging services. I sat her down and showed her every piece of evidence: the bank statements, the forged signatures, the neuropsych evaluation, the TikTok videos with their cruel captions. Eleanor's certainty wavered. She started asking questions. She looked at the forged signatures and admitted they didn't look like mine. She read the doctor's evaluation. She watched the TikTok video where Brandon called me a ridiculous old lady. "I think I need to talk to Brandon," she said carefully. During the third week, Frank discovered something useful. Courtney Brennan, Brandon's girlfriend and witness, had a criminal record: petty theft, fraud. She'd written bad checks. She was on probation. This didn't prove she was lying now, but it damaged her credibility. Sarah, my daughter, called with news. She'd been doing her own investigation from Denver. She'd gone through Brandon's social media accounts, his public records, everything she could find online. She found financial records he'd posted carelessly, evidence that contradicted his claims. Screenshots of expensive purchases, trips, meals, all funded by my stolen money. "Mom, I'm flying home," Sarah said. "I'll testify at the hearing. I'll tell them the truth about Brandon." Then, during the third week, I made a discovery that changed everything. I was searching through Gerald's old files in the attic, looking for anything that might help my case. I found Gerald's journal. He'd kept sporadic entries over the years, mostly about work and family events. I'd forgotten it existed. I flipped through the pages, seeing Gerald's familiar handwriting. Then I found an entry from 10 years ago. Gerald had caught Brandon, then 22 years old, stealing money from my purse. Gerald confronted him, made him promise never to do it again. Gerald wrote, "I didn't tell Margot. I couldn't break her heart like that, but I'm worried about him. He didn't seem sorry, just sorry he got caught. Brandon had been stealing from me for at least a decade. This wasn't new behavior. This was a pattern." I kept reading. 2 years before Gerald died, there was another entry. Gerald's valuable coin collection had gone missing, worth about $8,000. Gerald never reported it stolen, but he wrote, "I think Brandon took the coins. I can't prove it, but things keep disappearing when he visits. I don't know what to do. I'm afraid of what will happen to Margot when I'm gone." Tears blurred my vision. Gerald knew. Gerald was protecting me from the truth, and Gerald's worst fears had come true. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. A half-written letter from Gerald to Brandon, dated 3 days before Gerald died. The letter was never finished, never sent. In it, Gerald threatened to cut Brandon out of his will entirely. He wrote, "You need to get your act together and stop using your mother. If you don't change, I'll make sure you get nothing. This is your last chance." Gerald died 3 days after writing this. A sudden, massive heart attack. The doctors said his heart condition made it inevitable, that it could have happened any time. But the timing haunted me. Did Brandon find this letter? Did he know Gerald was going to cut him off? Could Brandon have done something? I mentioned this to Frank. His face grew serious, then careful. "Margot, that's exactly the kind of paranoid thinking Brandon's lawyer will use against you. Gerald had a documented heart condition." The doctors were clear. "Don't go down this road. We need to focus on what we can prove." But I couldn't shake the feeling. Something was wrong about Gerald's death. Something I'd missed. The day before the hearing, Patricia from Adult Protective Services did a final home visit. She reviewed all my evidence. She asked me dozens of questions. At the end, she said quietly, "Off the record, Miss Margot, I think your son is lying. But I have to remain neutral in my official report. I'll state the facts. The judge will decide." That night, I received an anonymous text message. The number was blocked. The message said, "He's lying about everything. I can prove it, but I'm scared. See, Courtney, the girlfriend." I texted back immediately. "Who is this? Can we meet?" No response. I showed the text to Frank. He said we needed to find Courtney, get her to talk. But we had less than 12 hours before the hearing. The next morning, I arrived at the courthouse. Frank was there. Sarah had flown in and stood beside me. Eleanor was there too, but sitting in the middle, not clearly on either side. Dorothy came for moral support. Brandon arrived with his lawyer, Richard Hastings. Hastings was in his 50s, wearing an expensive suit, carrying a leather briefcase. He looked professional and confident. Courtney was with them. She wouldn't look at me. Just before we entered the courtroom, Courtney approached me in the hallway. She whispered quickly, "I'm sorry. I didn't know he was going to take it this far. He told me you were rich and abusive, and you owed him. I believed him. But I saw things. I know he's lying about everything. I have proof." "What proof?" I asked urgently. "Text messages. Videos he recorded of you without permission. Recordings of him talking to his lawyer about how to play this. His real bank statements showing the stolen money. Everything. Will you testify? Will you help me?" Courtney looked terrified. "I don't know. He'll destroy me. He's dangerous. I just wanted to warn you." Brandon saw us talking. He walked over quickly, all charm. "Court, honey, come here. Don't talk to her. My lawyer says it could compromise things." Courtney went with him, but as she walked away, She mouthed 2 words at me. "I'm sorry." The competency hearing began at 10 o'clock. Judge Martha Rodriguez presided. She was in her late 50s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. This was a civil proceeding to determine whether I needed a temporary conservator. Brandon's lawyer, Richard Hastings, presented first. He painted a picture of a devoted son caring for his declining mother. He claimed I'd shown signs of cognitive problems, that I'd made wild accusations against my own child, that I'd become paranoid and volatile. He presented the police report about my alleged threats. He showed the court Brandon's TikTok videos, framing them as a frustrated caregiver venting his stress. Then he called Brandon to testify. My son walked to the witness stand. He took the oath. He sat down, and then he began to cry. He talked about how much he loved me. He described how I'd started changing about a year ago, forgetting things, getting confused, mixing up conversations. He said he'd been terrified to watch his mother decline. He claimed I'd given him permission to access my bank accounts, then forgotten I did so. He said I'd accused him of stealing when he was just using money I'd authorized him to use. He claimed I'd physically pushed him during an argument, though he'd never raised a hand to me. He said he was terrified of my recent behavior, that he only wanted to protect me, to help me. He brought up the TikTok videos, his voice breaking. I was stressed and venting to friends. It was wrong, but I was at my breaking point trying to care for her. He was convincing, incredibly convincing. Eleanor was crying. Even Judge Rodriguez looked sympathetic. Then Hastings called Courtney to testify. I had hope. Maybe Courtney would tell the truth. Maybe the proof she'd mentioned would save me. But when Courtney took the stand, she lied. Under oath, she backed up every one of Brandon's claims. She said I'd threatened her on the phone, that I was controlling and mean to Brandon, that she'd witnessed me having episodes of confusion, that I'd forgotten conversations right after having them. She said Brandon was devoted and patient with his mother, that he'd sacrificed years of his life to care for me. Why was she lying? I saw the answer when she stepped down from the witness stand. Brandon put his arm around her shoulders. He whispered something in her ear. She looked frightened. He'd threatened her. Somehow, Brandon had leverage over her. Maybe evidence of her parole violations. Maybe threats to turn her in. Something that scared her more than perjury. Then it was Frank's turn to present my defense. He called Sarah to testify. My daughter spoke clearly and passionately about my competence, about Brandon's history of manipulation, about his expensive lifestyle funded by stolen money. But Hastings objected repeatedly, claiming Sarah was biased and hadn't lived near me for years. Frank called Dr. Helen Park, the neuropsychologist. She presented my test results in detail. No cognitive decline, above average scores, completely competent. Her testimony was powerful, scientific, irrefutable. Frank called Dorothy, who testified about my daily competence and independence, about the conversations we'd had, the errands I'd run, the clear thinking I'd demonstrated. He presented the bank evidence, the forged signatures, the unauthorized credit card, the pattern of systematic theft. Then Frank called me to testify. I told my story calmly, clearly. I provided dates and details. I explained how I'd discovered the theft, how Brandon had reacted, how he'd turned my family against me. I was prepared. I was credible. I showed no signs of confusion or paranoia. I thought it was going well. But then Richard Hastings cross-examined me. Miss Margot, isn't it true you recently accused your son of potentially being involved in your husband's death 8 years ago? I froze. How did he know that? I'd only mentioned it to Frank. I tried to explain. No, I simply found a concerning letter and wondered about the timing. Hastings cut me off. So you do believe your son murdered your husband? And you think this isn't evidence of paranoid delusions? Frank objected. Judge Rodriguez sustained the objection. But the damage was done. I looked paranoid. I looked like I was making wild accusations without evidence. Then Hastings produced a witness I'd never seen before. A woman named Glenda Price, around 60 years old, who claimed to be my friend from church. Glenda testified that I'd been acting strangely for months, forgetting conversations, repeating myself, seeming confused. I whispered urgently to Frank, "I don't know her. I've never seen her before. I don't even go to that church." Frank objected, demanded proof of their friendship. Glenda showed photographs, pictures of her with a woman who looked vaguely like me. In dim lighting, it could be mistaken for me, but it wasn't me. The photos were fake or staged with someone else. Judge Rodriguez looked concerned. The case was getting muddy, contradictory. The judge called a lunch recess. We had 90 minutes. Frank pulled me aside. "Someone's helping Brandon manufacture evidence. This is beyond lying. This is conspiracy and fraud. We need to prove those photos are fake, that this woman is lying." During lunch, I tried frantically to reach Courtney. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I called the salon where she worked. They said she'd called in sick. Sarah had an idea. "Mom, Brandon's apartment is only 10 minutes away. Let's go check on Courtney. Make sure she's okay." We went, Sarah, Frank, and I. The landlord was a man Frank knew professionally. We explained the situation. He agreed to let us do a welfare check. The apartment was completely empty, cleared out. Brandon and Courtney were gone. All their belongings, furniture, everything, gone. On the kitchen counter, there was a note in Courtney's handwriting. "I'm sorry. I was going to tell the truth, but he said he'd turn me in for violating probation. He has videos of me doing things that would send me back to jail. I can't risk it. I'm leaving. Don't try to find me. The proof is in his laptop. Password is Gerald's biggest mistake. Good luck, Courtney." We rushed back to court. The afternoon session resumed. Frank tried to present the new evidence. The note from Courtney, the sudden disappearance, but Hastings objected. "Your Honor, there's no proof this note is legitimate, and my client has every right to relocate if he chooses." Judge Rodriguez looked frustrated. "Where is your client, Mr. Hastings?" "He was feeling unwell after this morning's emotional testimony," Hastings said smoothly. "He's resting nearby." Judge Rodriguez made her decision. "I'm calling a 2-day recess. I need time to review all evidence. Mr. Morrison, if you have additional proof of fraud or perjury, bring it Monday morning. Otherwise, I'll make my ruling then." Court is adjourned. Brandon had disappeared. Courtney was gone. The hearing was paused until Monday. I might still lose my autonomy, my freedom, everything. But we had one lead. Brandon's laptop. Password. Gerald's biggest mistake. We just had to find it. Friday afternoon, after the hearing, Frank, Sarah, and I regrouped at my house. We needed to find Brandon's laptop. But where would it be? Sarah remembered something. "Mom, didn't Brandon have a storage unit where he kept some of Dad's old things?" "Yes. When Brandon moved back home 8 years ago, he'd put some of his possessions in storage. I paid the monthly fee. Of course I did. The storage facility was Secure Store on Hamilton Road. I had a key on my keyring. We drove there immediately. The unit was full of boxes, old furniture, Gerald's tools, and there, sitting on a folding table, was a laptop. Not a new one, but an older model Brandon had used years ago. We took it. Frank said the legality was questionable, but given that I paid for the storage unit, we could argue it was defensible. Back at my house, we opened the laptop. Sarah typed in the password Courtney had given us, Gerald's biggest mistake. It worked. What we found made my blood turn to ice. Folder after folder of evidence documenting Brandon's long-term plan to steal everything from me. There were TikTok video drafts, dozens of videos of me, filmed secretly over years. Some he'd posted, many he hadn't. The captions were cruel, mocking my appearance, my age, my body. In one draft video, Brandon talked directly to the camera, playing the long game with the old lady. "She'll fund my lifestyle until I can get control of everything. Then I'll put her somewhere and sell the house." There were financial documents, spreadsheets tracking every dollar he'd stolen, notes about how he'd installed keylogger software on my computer to get my passwords, credit card applications he'd filled out in my name, bank account access he'd gained through forgery. One document was titled Financial Goal. It read, "Get conservatorship Access the $75,000 in savings. Sell house for approximately $300,000. Total profit, $375,000 minimum. There were text messages with Courtney. Brandon coaching her to lie. Just say what I told you. If you do this, I'll split the money with you. If you don't, I'll send your probation officer the video of you doing coke at that party. You'll go back to jail. There were text messages with Richard Hastings, planning the fake witness Glenda, discussing strategy to make me look incompetent. Hastings wasn't even a real lawyer. He was a disbarred attorney Brandon had found, who agreed to play along for a cut of the money. Then I found the file that destroyed me. It was labeled Dad's Insurance. Inside were research articles about inducing heart attacks, medical websites about medications that can trigger cardiac events, notes about Gerald's heart condition and his medications, a timeline. February 10th, slipped extra doses into his evening pills. February 13th, Gerald dead. February 15th, Mom gets life insurance payout. Mission accomplished. My son had murdered his father. My husband, Brandon, had killed Gerald to get the life insurance money. I couldn't breathe. Sarah caught me as my knees buckled. Mom. Oh my God. Mom. Frank was already on his phone. We need to call the police. This is evidence of murder, conspiracy, fraud, identity theft. Everything. But before he could dial, my doorbell rang. It was Brandon, standing on my porch, smiling. He spoke through the door. Mom, I know you have my laptop. That's breaking and entering, by the way. Illegal search. Nothing on there is admissible in court. And you know what? I've decided to drop the conservatorship case. You can keep your independence. All I want is for you to drop the charges, give me $200,000 as a settlement, and we go our separate ways. If you don't, I'll drag this through court for years. I'll make your life hell. I'll turn Sarah's kids against you. I'll destroy everything. You have 24 hours to decide. He walked away, got into Gerald's truck, and drove off. I sank onto my couch. This was rock bottom. My son was a thief, a liar, and a murderer. I had evidence, but he was right that the laptop seizure was legally questionable. He was threatening my grandchildren now. He would never stop. Never. Sarah knelt beside me. Mom, we have to fight him. We can't let him win. But I was so tired, so heartbroken. Maybe I should just pay him. Maybe I should just make this nightmare end. Frank was firm. Margot, if you pay him, he wins. Men like Brandon don't stop. He'll come back for more in a year, in 5 years. He'll bleed you dry and then put you in a home anyway. You have to fight. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Gerald, about how Brandon had murdered him, how I'd missed every sign, how I'd loved and supported and enabled the person who'd killed my husband. Saturday morning, Dorothy came over with her son Marcus. Marcus was 45, worked in computer forensics for the FBI. Dorothy had asked him to come as a favor. Marcus said, Miss Margot, if I can make a forensic copy of that laptop's hard drive and verify the data integrity, I can provide expert testimony that makes it admissible. I can authenticate every file, every timestamp. It'll hold up in court. He paused. And I shouldn't do this. But my mom told me what he did to you. I'm going to call in some favors. I know people who can trace his current location through digital footprints. We'll find him. For the first time in days, I felt something like hope. Marcus worked all day Saturday on the laptop. He made forensic copies, verified metadata, documented everything according to FBI standards. By Saturday afternoon, he confirmed, every file is authentic. The timestamps check out. This will hold up in court. And I found something else. Brandon's been accessing cloud backups from his phone. I can see his current location. He's at the Riverside Inn, 15 miles from here. We called Detective Linda Shaw, who'd taken my original theft report. She came to my house Saturday evening with a prosecutor, David Yates. They reviewed all the evidence. Marcus's forensic report, the laptop contents, everything. They had enough to charge Brandon with identity theft, fraud, forgery, conspiracy. The murder charge would be harder to prove. Gerald had been cremated. There was no body to exhume for toxicology. But the notes on the laptop, combined with the suspicious timing, might be enough for at least a manslaughter charge. Frank worked through the weekend to find Courtney. He traced her to her mother's house 3 counties away. Frank drove there Sunday morning and convinced her, "If you testify truthfully now, we'll help you. The prosecutor will give you immunity for your cooperation. But if you don't, you'll go down with Brandon as an accomplice." Courtney was terrified of Brandon, but more terrified of prison. She agreed. She'd testify to everything, the lies, the threats, the manufactured evidence, all of it. The plan was set. We told Brandon I'd agree to his demands. We'd meet Monday morning at my house at 10 o'clock. I'd have a cashier's check ready. He'd sign papers agreeing to stay away forever. But when Brandon showed up Monday morning, police would be waiting instead. I called Brandon Saturday night. My hands shook as I dialed. He answered on the second ring, sounding cocky. I kept my voice steady. "Brandon, you win. I'll give you the money, $200,000. But I need a few days to liquidate some investments. Can we meet Monday morning at my house to finalize everything? I just want this nightmare to end." There was a long pause. Brandon was suspicious. "How do I know you're not setting me up?" "Because I'm 67 years old and I'm tired," I said. And that part was true. "I just want peace. I'll have the cashier's check ready. You sign an agreement to stay away from me and Sarah and the grandchildren. We never speak again. That's all I want." Another pause. "Fine. Monday, 10 in the morning. Have the check ready. And Mom, I'm almost sorry it came to this, but you should have just kept supporting me. This is your fault, really." The line went dead. Sunday passed in a blur of preparation. Detective Shaw and 2 other officers would hide in my house. David Yates, the prosecutor, would be present to formally charge Brandon. Frank would document everything. Sarah insisted on being there too. Eleanor flew back in, finally completely on my side after seeing all the evidence. Dorothy came Sunday evening to pray with me. She held my hands in her kitchen and said, "You're the bravest woman I know, Margot. You're going to get through this." Monday morning arrived. At 9:30, Detective Shaw and her team arrived. They positioned themselves in my kitchen, out of sight from the front door. Frank reviewed the plan one more time. Sarah held my hand. Eleanor stood beside me. At exactly 10 o'clock, Brandon knocked on the door. I opened it. My son stood there, wearing expensive clothes bought with my stolen money. He smiled at me like we were old friends. He walked into my living room. "Got the check, Mom?" "Before we do this," I said, "I need to understand something. Why? Why did you do all of this?" Brandon laughed. It wasn't a nice laugh. "Because I could. Because you made it so easy. Because you were weak, and I'm not." Dad was weak too, always working his boring teaching job, following the rules, being the good guy. Where did it get him? Dead at 62. I'm not living like that. I'm taking what I deserve. "And Gerald?" I asked quietly. "Did you kill your father?" Brandon's smile faded. His eyes went cold. "You can't prove that. Even if I did, and I'm not saying I did, you can't prove anything. The old man's ashes are scattered. There's no evidence, just paranoid accusations from a senile old woman." "Actually," I said, "we can prove it." Detective Shaw and the officers emerged from the kitchen. "Brandon Hutchins, you're under arrest." Brandon tried to run. He made it 3 steps before an officer tackled him. They cuffed his hands behind his back while he screamed at me. "You'll regret this. You're a terrible mother. I'll get out and I'll destroy you. This isn't over." I looked at my son, really looked at him, for what I knew would be the last time. I felt nothing but sadness. Not anger, not hatred. Just profound sadness for the little boy who'd somehow become this monster. "No, Brandon," I said quietly. "It is over, and I'm not afraid of you anymore." They took him away. The weeks and months that followed were difficult, but brought a strange peace. Brandon was charged with multiple felonies. Courtney testified against him in exchange for immunity. She told the court everything. The lies, the threats, the manufactured evidence. Richard Hastings, the fake lawyer, was arrested for fraud and conspiracy. Glenda Price, the fake witness, was charged with perjury. The prosecutor worked with me extensively on the murder charge. Gerald's body had been cremated, but they had Brandon's notes, his research, his own words documenting what he'd done. Combined with the suspicious timing and Gerald's unfinished letter threatening to cut Brandon off, they built a case. They couldn't prove premeditated murder beyond reasonable doubt, but they could prove voluntary manslaughter. That Brandon had deliberately tampered with Gerald's medications, knowing it could trigger a fatal cardiac event. Brandon's lawyer advised him to take a plea deal rather than go to trial. He pleaded guilty to identity theft, fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and voluntary manslaughter. The judge sentenced him to 23 years in prison. 23 years. He'd be 55 years old when he got out, if he got out. The bank refunded most of my stolen money once the criminal case was resolved. I sued Brandon's estate for the rest and got a judgment, though there was almost nothing to collect. I'd never see all my money back, but I had enough. My family slowly healed. Eleanor apologized over and over. I should have believed you from the start. I should have known. Sarah grew even closer to me. She brought my grandchildren to visit more often. I taught them about courage, about standing up for yourself even when it's hard, about the difference between love and enabling. Some extended family members apologized. Others drifted away, embarrassed by their role in doubting me. I let them go. I didn't need people in my life who wouldn't believe me when it mattered. The hardest part was processing everything. I went to therapy to work through the betrayal, the grief of losing Gerald all over again when I learned the truth, the horror of what Brandon had become. My therapist helped me understand that I didn't create him. I loved him. He made his choices. I struggled with guilt. How did I miss the signs? How did I raise someone capable of murder? But over time, I learned to separate Brandon's actions from my worth as a mother. I'd done my best. I'd loved him. I'd supported him. None of that made me responsible for what he chose to become. I slowly made my house feel like mine again. I took down all photos of Brandon. I kept photos of Gerald, of Sarah and the grandchildren, of Eleanor and my friends. I repainted Gerald's old office, which Brandon had taken over. I made it into a reading room with a comfortable chair and good light. I volunteered at a women's shelter, helping others recognize and escape financial abuse. I shared my story. I told other women, trust your instincts, document everything. Don't let anyone make you doubt your own reality. Brandon's TikTok videos were taken down after his arrest. Some of his followers defended him at first, but when the full story broke, public opinion turned. People were horrified. I received messages from strangers apologizing for the comments they'd left. I didn't care about online vindication. I cared about peace, about reclaiming my life, about moving forward. 6 months after Brandon's sentencing, I was sitting in my kitchen on a Tuesday morning, the same kitchen where this nightmare had started. Dorothy came over with fresh muffins she'd baked. We sat at my table, drinking coffee, laughing about something small and ordinary. Sunlight filled the room with a gentle glow. The morning was quiet and peaceful. I looked around my kitchen, my house, my life, and I realized something important. I was okay. I was more than okay. I was free. People ask me if I regret having Brandon, if I wish I could go back and change things. The truth is complicated. I loved him. I loved the baby, the toddler, the little boy. Somewhere along the way, he became someone I didn't recognize. Maybe he was always that person and I couldn't see it. Maybe something broke inside him that I couldn't fix. I'll never really know. What I do know is this. I'm 67 years old. I spent too many years making myself smaller so other people could feel bigger. I let Brandon take and take and take because I thought that's what mothers do. Sacrifice endlessly, give everything, accept anything. But there's a difference between sacrifice and self-destruction. There's a difference between love and enabling. Gerald used to tell me, stand up for yourself, even when it costs you something. I wish I'd understood what he meant earlier. Standing up for myself cost me my son. Or at least, it cost me the idea of who I thought my son was, but it saved my life. It saved my dignity. It saved my future. I have Sarah. I have my grandchildren who visit and fill this house with laughter. I have Eleanor and Dorothy, and a community that stood by me when everything fell apart. I have this house that finally feels safe again. I have enough money to live comfortably, even if not as much as before. And I have something Brandon can never take from me. I have peace. Some people will take everything from you if you let them, even people you love, especially people you love, because they know you'll sacrifice yourself to protect them. But protecting someone from consequences isn't love. It's enabling. And enabling someone to hurt you isn't kindness. It's self-betrayal. Age doesn't make you obsolete. It doesn't make you weak or stupid or ridiculous, no matter what some cruel video says. Age gives you perspective. It gives you the strength to see clearly, even when the truth breaks your heart. It gives you the wisdom to know when to fight, and the courage to actually do it. I learned that it's never too late to fight back. 67 years old, and I had to become stronger than I'd ever been. I had to trust myself when everyone told me I was wrong. I had to risk everything to save myself, and I did it. I survived. Real victory isn't revenge. It's peace. It's standing in your kitchen on an ordinary morning, drinking coffee with a friend, and feeling safe. It's knowing you did the right thing, even when it hurt. It's understanding that you survived, you persevered, and you're still here. Brandon thought that face suited me. The face of an old, ridiculous woman he could mock and rob and destroy. He was wrong. This face belongs to a survivor. This face belongs to a woman who fought back and won. This face belongs to me. I stand at my kitchen sink, looking out at my garden. I planted new flowers last month. Roses and daisies and bright purple coneflowers. They're blooming now, reaching toward the Sunday I smile. I'm okay. I'm more than okay. I'm free, and that's worth everything. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand up to someone you loved, even when it cost you the relationship? Have you ever felt trapped by someone's manipulation or control? How did you find the courage to break free? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's struggling right now. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories of survival, courage, and triumph. And share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes we all need a reminder that it's never too late to fight for ourselves. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for believing that older women deserve dignity, respect, and the right to control our own lives. Thank you for understanding that love without boundaries isn't really love at all. I hope you find your own peace, whatever that looks like for you. I hope you know your own worth, and I hope you never let anyone make you feel ridiculous for simply existing. Take care of yourselves, stand strong, and remember, that face of yours, it's perfect exactly as it is.